We have had a lot of great content. We have a lot more great content coming up in the schedule. And thanks to US Sailing members, we're able to adapt and evolve to better serve sailors with content like this. Please visit us at mem.ussailing.org to join or renew your US Sailing membership today. And an extra special part about today is that we have a new US Sailing member benefit, 25% off NorthU online virtual webinars, either live if you want to register for them, or they're recorded as well and you can purchase them after the fact. Please head over to your My US Sailing account and log in with your member ID and password to go to your member coupons page. And you can get the exclusive promo code for the NorthU 25% off on the virtual online webinars. And the link as well to go over to NorthU's website to purchase them. It's a great benefit, and it's the steepest discount offered in the industry. So we're really appreciative of NorthU and Bill Gladstone for offering that to all of our members. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Bill Gladstone. Bill, take it away.
Thank you, Josh, and welcome aboard, everybody. Good to have you all here. We've got a lot of stuff to do, so I will not take much time to introduce myself. Just jump right in. We have lots of stuff to do. I'll tell you sea stories and introduce myself as we go along. We love working with US Sailing and appreciate all that they do for the sport, and glad that you're here to join us with them. NorthU is the education branch of North Sails. We do seminars, clinics, a lot more webinars than we used to, and do coaching and on the water programs as well, when hopefully we'll get a chance to do that again soon. If you've been to a NorthU program before, you know that we consider racing success to be built on a pyramid of boat handling, boat speed, and tactics. And we're going to work our way up that pyramid today. We will never get to the end of the sailboat racing curriculum. We'll do what we can in the time that's available to us now. And next time we meet, we'll pick up where we leave off and move along further. As we go along, you're invited to ask any question on any topic at any time. You can put those into the chat or Q&A window, and Josh will monitor those, and periodically we'll take a moment to pause and take a look at questions. So please ask questions there. That's how we know we're on target. And don't worry about asking tricky ones. We've been doing this for long enough that we know how to duck the questions we don't want to deal with. So we're going to, as I said, do some boat handling, some boat speed and tactics, and your questions will help us stay on target. We're going to start with some boat handling, and we're going to jump in to a little bit on jibes. We're going to take a look at symmetric spinnaker jibe, and then we'll take a look at some asymmetric spinnaker jibes, and talk about what it takes to have successful jibes. As a tactician, I can tell you that successful jibes and good boat handling, the tactics just don't work if the boat handling's not up to speed. So yeah, your boat handling has to be second nature, your boat speed second to none, and then tactics will win your races. So we're going to run through this video. We'll let this jibe play through. Hopefully it's playing well for you. We've been playing around with trying to size those right. And actually, I'm going to pause for just a sec and make sure that this is set up right. Yeah, optimize the screen. All right, back to it. And we're just going to let this play through, and then we'll back it up and review it, and then play it through one more time again. So nice big trim on the spinnaker, getting out from behind the main before they start to turn. The trick in all jibes, well-executed jibes, is for the trimmers to stay ahead of the driver, or more accurately, for the driver to follow the trim. If you turn too fast or trim too slow, then the jibes fail. So we'll go back and look at this jibe one more time, getting ready to jibe. And as they sail into it, the first step, we talk about squaring back the pole often, but really it's not so much squaring the pole back as it is easing the sheet. So it's not so much pull back as sheet ease, and the sheet gets eased. We'll pause here. The sheet's eased to where the clue of the spinnaker is almost at the headstay. And at that point, the spinnaker's in almost a wing and wing position. At least that's how I teach new sailors, new spinnaker sailors who are accustomed to jibs. We talk about getting the spinnaker over into wing and wing position. And at that point, the boat's ready to jibe. The driver shouldn't turn past dead downwind until the spinnaker is out in that wing and wing position. So initially a slow, smooth turn down, big ease on the spinnaker sheet, perhaps a little bit of square back on the pole, but it's mostly sheet ease more than a pull back that gets the spinnaker into the right position for a jibe. As we get to this point, there are a couple of things that are noteworthy. One is that the air, as we turn past dead downwind, will start to flow upstream around the back of the main and into the spinnaker. And if the spinnaker is still trimmed in behind the main, it'll collapse. By rotating the spinnaker out from behind the main all the way over to this wing and wing position, the spinnaker will fly throughout the jibe. The other thing that to pay attention to at this moment is at this time, the spinnaker itself is starting to pull away from the boat. And at this point, there's no load on the pole, and this is the time to jibe the pole. Earlier, we'll back up a little bit, before we square down, the pressure on the pole is pushing the pole against the rig. But as we square down and ease the sheet, and I'll just roll ahead here, at this point, the spinnaker is pulling the pole away from the mast. And if you're the foredeck crew, that's your signal. When the pole unloads, then you can jibe, trip the pole and jibe it, and the spinnaker won't press back and collapse against the boat. So as the spinnaker pulls away from the boat, that's when you trip and jibe the pole. I like to go off both the sheet and the guy, off the mast and off the guy, and then onto the new sheet. That new sheet will be right convenient because the sheet is running from the shroud right to the head stay. It's within easy reach. Grab onto the new sheet. And meanwhile, the spinnaker is flying on that starboard side. We jibe the main late in the turn, and the driver makes a smooth turn right to course coming out of the jibe. So we'll just play through that one more time quickly and talk it through. So we're getting ready to jibe. This crew could be a little more aggressive with their weight and steer the boat with weight and less rudder by moving to windward. And as they turn downwind, a smooth turn down, ease the sheet, trip when the pole unloads, jibe the main late in the turn, and push the pole forward, and then retrim as the boat accelerates out of the jibe. So that's just a quick primer on end for end jibe. Want to square the pole back a little bit, but mostly ease the sheet going in, and don't rush your trip. Trip when the spinnaker unloads and no longer needs the support of the pole. All right, so that's a quick look at an end for end jibe. We're going to jump to an asymmetric jibe next, and this is here again, as with symmetric jibes, the secret to successful jibes is for the driver to follow the trim. The trim stays ahead of the turn, you get a successful jibe, and these guys do beautiful jibes here. Nice smooth turn down, big trim on the new sheet, ease the old sheet, and the foredeck crew helping to bring the spinnaker crew down and back as they come through the jibe. So we'll go back and look at that again in a little more detail. Getting ready to jibe. The foredeck crew are up here getting ready to pull the crew down and back as the spinnaker is eased. And by pulling down, they stop, although we don't really see the top of the sail, they stop the top of the sail from forming a big tornado at the top. If you turn too fast or trim too slow, you get a big tornado that you have to pull out of the top of the sail and invert before you can get the sail to fly properly. So by pulling down and turning slowly, letting the trim stay ahead of the turn, you avoid that tornado and come through the jibe much more quickly. So a smooth turn down. Here again, a little more weight to starboard would help with the turn. have to use less rudder that way. The sheet ease on the leeward side, although we can't see it behind the main, easing the sheet just to get the clue forward to the headstay. You don't need to ease any further than that. If you ease the sheet more than that, it just makes more to drag back. So ease the sheet to get the clue near the headstay, pull down and back on the new clue, and get that around and coming back almost to the shrouds as you turn to dead downwind and then jibe the main. And they're actually holding the main briefly and delaying the main jibe before they let the boom across. That's a pretty cool move to hold that boom out a little bit going at the end of the jibe. Had a couple of questions before about when it's appropriate to do that. And if you can hold the boom easily, then go ahead and hold it a little bit for light air jibes. If it's difficult to hold, then don't. Get out of the way. So just in light air jibes, you can delay that boom crossing, and then it helps the spinnaker fly a little better through the jibe. We'll watch one more jibe from these guys, then we'll go to some other stuff. Nice big pull on the two guys on the bow, helping get the clue around. Clue's way back, holding the boom a little bit, and then letting the boom across late. Nice hot angle coming out. And as the boat loads up, watch for a big sheet ease on the spinnaker. As the boat accelerates to speed, the sheet gets eased, the boat stands up and turns down to course. There they're turning down to course as they got back up to full speed. Big ease on the sheet, and they come out at full speed. Beautiful exit on that to get quickly back up to full speed. Great team on the J111 here. All right, so that's some boat handling stuff, and we'll jump back into some other things. If you have questions on any of this stuff, pop them into the chat window or the Q&A, and we'll get to them. So onward from boat handling, we'll work our way up the pyramid a little bit into some boat speed stuff. Any questions we need to look at now, Josh? Let me know. Otherwise, we'll just press ahead. All right, onward. Into some boat speed. We're going to take a look at some of the sources of sail power and how we can change the mix of power to match the sailing conditions we're racing in, or sailing in for that matter. Don't have to do this just to race. So all sails have three sources of power: angle of attack, depth, and twist. Angle of attack we control by trimming the sails in or by turning the boat down. The harder you trim in, or the more you turn down, the more you increase angle of attack and increase power. The second source of sail power is sail depth. Deeper sail shape's a more powerful shape. And then the third source of power is twist. Actually, more twist reduces power. So those are our three sources of power. Once again, angle of attack. Sails are luffing. They have no angle of attack and no power. As you turn down or trim sails in, you increase angle of attack and increase power. If you overdo it and stall, then power drops precipitously. Same with sail depth. A deeper sail shape is a more powerful sail shape. As long as you maintain flow with depth, you have more power. And then twist is our third source of power. Less twist increases power. So we're going to play with those three parts of power and take a look at how they impact overall performance and how we can change the mix of power. One thing that's interesting about twist in particular is how the wind gradient creates and impacts twist. All sails are designed, built, and trimmed with some twist built in. And that's because the wind is different aloft than alow. Alow, A-L-O-W, it's a word. And the wind is stronger aloft than alow. The boat speed is the same up high as it is down low. And so our apparent wind angle is different up high. So as we have the same boat speed, but a different wind speed up high, different true wind speed, that creates a stronger apparent wind and a wider apparent wind angle aloft. So our twist is set up, designed, and trimmed to match that wider apparent wind angle. And you can tell when you've got your twist set up right as a starting point when your telltales are flying all the way up and down the leach of the main. So you need some twist just to match the wind gradient. And this is true for both mains and jibs. From there, we can fine tune twist to improve pointing or create a wider steering groove. And we'll take a look at that coming up next. So once again, angle of attack plus depth plus twist is our total power. Our first goal as sail trimmers is to get the boat up to full power, neither underpowered nor overpowered. We want it to be fully hiked, but not out of control. We want to have a reasonable amount of heel, which is reflected in a balanced or neutral helm or nearly neutral helm. And then from there, we can play around. Once we're at full power, we can change the mix of power. What do we mean by that? Here's a quick look at a collection of boats, all with the same total power. How do I know they have the same total power? They're all heeled the same amount and at the same true wind angle. But the mix of power is different. On the left, the boat has flat sail shapes with very little twist. Flat sails for less power, less twist for more power. As we move from left to right, we increase depth, that increases power, and increase twist, that reduces power. So we add power one way, reduce power the other way, end up with the same total, but a different mix. Which of these is best? For a given wind speed, the best mix of power depends on the sea state. In smooth water, we'll go with the flat sail shape, and in choppier conditions, a deeper, more twisted shape. So on the left, a smooth water sailing with a flatter sail shape and less twist. And on the right, a more power-hungry boat, but also choppier conditions, a deeper, more twisted sail shape for sailing in chop. So once again, smooth water sailing, we have flatter sails, which produce less power, and less twist, which increases power. The advantage of that setup is it produces high pointing and low drag for high speed. The difficulty that creates is a narrow steering groove and poor acceleration. So smooth water sailing, flatter, less twisted sail shapes for high pointing and high speed, but a narrow steering groove and poor acceleration. Conversely, in relatively choppy conditions for the same wind speed, we go with a deeper, more twisted sail shape. Extra depth for better acceleration. Every wave is slowing us down, so we're constantly in acceleration mode in chop. And more twist creates a wider, more forgiving steering groove, a more gradual onset and release of power as we wander through the waves or the boat gets pitched through the waves. We end up with a wider steering groove, a slight compromise to pointing and speed, but better overall performance in chop by changing our mix of power to match the conditions. So quick review of that. Less twist adds power, and flat sails reduce power in smooth water, and we end up with a less twist and flatter sails and a narrow steering groove and poor acceleration in smooth water. Well, we can steer to a narrow steering groove in smooth water, so that's not a problem. And once we get up to full speed, the boat carries speed, so the acceleration problems aren't really a concern once we get up to full speed in smooth water. Conversely, in relatively choppy conditions, we sail with extra twist for a little wider steering groove, extra depth for better acceleration, and we have a slight compromise in our pointing and speed to be able to get the boat up to its full potential for those conditions. All right, any questions on any of that? We're rolling along. Once again, smooth water sailing and on the left and choppy conditions on the right. Most of the time we're somewhere across the spectrum, not not in the extreme of full power or in perfectly flat water, but somewhere across that spectrum in the middle of it. And fine tuning to suit the conditions that we're in, that's the difference between good performance and great performance. A couple of details that deserve mention, or a couple of broad issues, actually not so much details, but the difference between good performance and great performance, between middle of the fleet and the podium, is usually about 2%. The difference between mid-fleet and podium is 2%. If you go from, if you finish a 100-minute race in 98 minutes, you'll win. That's 2%. If you go from an average speed of 5 to 5.1, that's 2%. And it's all the little things. It's fine-tuning the mix of trim to suit the conditions for each moment, that sort of stuff that adds up. And it's really not even one thing that's worth 2%. It's 10 things that are each worth 1/10 of 2%, all the little stuff that adds up to be the margin of victory. And getting the perfect mix of power for the conditions that you're in, that's one part of that equation. When you get it set up perfectly, then lock it in. Cleat everything, don't move a thing. Take a deep breath, exhale. Usually you get about 8 seconds before conditions change and you have to get back to work. So really enjoy that moment and then get back to work, fine-tuning and working on trim again. Conditions will have changed. We're going to take a quick look at.
Hey, Bill,
yes.
We got a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
All right, please.
Great. So the first question comes from Don Miller. He asked, what controls specifically do you use to adjust the depth of the main? Backstay, outhaul, something else?
Oh, great question. And that we'll use as a segue to take us to the NorthU Upwind Sail Trim Simulator. So this is a simulator that we use to, it's actually driven by the sail design software. We use it for a sail trim purpose. And we can change sail depth in the middle and upper parts of the main with mast bend. So we usually use backstay to bend the mast. On some boats, it's vang sheeting and vang to bend the mast. Some boats have runners and other things, but one way or another, most boats, it's backstay that will bend the mast and flatten the main. The outhaul takes care of the lower portion of the main, and you can, to some extent, fine-tune rig tuning to change the spectrum of bend, whether the mast bends more up high or down low. That's a function of rig tuning as to as you bend your mast. But generally, the outhaul does the lower third of the main, and the backstay mast bend takes care of the middle and upper portions of the main. And more backstay flattens the main. And as a secondary impact, more backstay also adds a little twist aloft. So we ease the backstay off, the main gets deeper and the leech closes, there's less twist. And as we pull the backstay on, the main flattens out and adds some twist. If we're sailing along and we're happy with our twist profile, but we feel the sail is too deep, we might have to put some backstay on to flatten the sail and then add some main sheet to return to the twist profile that we had before. So the backstay, the primary impact of backstay is going to be on mast bend and sail depth, but the secondary impact will be on twist, and we can correct for that or fine-tune that with main sheet. The backstay also changes to a degree some of our draft position, and we can use luff tension then to hold the draft in its design position just forward or of the middle of the main, or perhaps about 40% aft in the main. So main sheet to control twist, and then backstay to control sail depth. And then traveler, we'll take another view of this from behind. We can play with the traveler to control angle of attack. We pull the boom up to the center line, and we can control boom position, angle of attack with the traveler, or with the helm, we can bear off a little bit or head up a little bit and change angle of attack, or we can adjust the traveler to take care of angle of attack. As the boat starts to get overpowered, often rather than let the traveler down, feathering the boat up a little bit is a better way to respond if we're in smooth water. In rougher conditions, we'd want to keep the bow down and depower other ways so we can keep our acceleration and crush those waves. So for smooth water sailing, we might just feather up. So here we are in, we're sailing upwind in 10 knots of breeze, and oh, let me make sure I got the share back on here. I think I might have blown it up. No, it seems like we're still here. We're going to change the wind speed here. Later on, we'll tell you how you can actually get access to this this sail trim simulator and play with it yourself. So now we're in. We've increased the wind speed to 12 knots, and we're heeled over too far. We're in 20 degrees of heel. So there are a couple of ways we can reduce our angle of heel. One way would be to head up a little bit. If we try and feather up too high, then we'll actually lose performance. Another thing we could do would be to add some backstay, flatten the main out that way, and then perhaps trim in a little harder, bear off just a little bit. And it might be time, 12 knots of breeze, maybe a little traveler down. So we can play around with this. I could play around with this a long time, but we have so much more to do today that we're not going to spend too much time here. But we'll tell you later. I'll give you a screen that'll show you how you can get access to the trim simulator as an application or as a download for your computer. You can also change the sea state a little bit. This is in smooth water, optimizing trim for smooth water versus optimizing trim in extra chop. And then this middle position is normal conditions. I'll tell you this beta version, the difference in ideal trim for smooth water versus chop is not as exaggerated, or not is not consistent with real world experience. I think the difference in trim in smooth water versus chop is greater than the simulator shows. So that's something we're working on, along with playing around more with the wind speed. Another fun thing here is this magic wand. You just press the button and you get to 100% VMG and ideal trim. I'm trying to figure out how to get one of those for my boat too. There'll be a small in-app purchase upcharge for that one once we get that figured out, and you can hook it into your rig. But for now, we don't have that. All right, other questions, Josh?
Yeah, Bill. Thanks. There's actually a couple that I wanted to hit on while you're still here with this, and it's kind of a two-part question. One is, I think that you showed really well in terms of how to look at the sail and the twist and the depth of it, and to make adjustments based on that. But can you talk a little bit about the controls that you would adjust if you're just looking at the telltales, for the top telltale not flying or the bottom one not flying?
Absolutely, yeah. So so as an initial setup, the main trimmer, well, actually, we're gonna take a quick jump to the jib here, and you can, at the bottom of the screen, you can change to the jib, and then you get views of the jib. We'll take a look up at the jib. We want to trim our jib initially, get ideal trim there. We can take a look at it from the trimmer's perspective, and the jib is trimmed in to what we have in our practice found to be good trim, nice, almost into the spreaders aloft. In fact, this is modeled on a J35, and often you have to trim in to where you get some deflection in the top spreader in a J35. We thought our model was screwy, and we actually found out that that's really what you do in a J35. So this is nice jib trim, and so that we start from there. The jib's trimmed right, that leads the boat upwind. The driver steers to the jib. If he heads up too high and starts pinching, or she starts pinching, then the inside telltale starts to dance. We bear off a little bit and drive just to keep the telltales flying in the jib. Once the telltales are set up right in the jib, we sail, try and sail a little higher. No, down a little high, lose pressure, back up a little bit, keep playing. The driver keeps just little playing around in the steering groove here. All right, now we'll go back to the main trimmer. Now the main trimmer is trimming in the main, and we want to try and maximize at this point our height and speed. And so we might trim a little harder, and we'll want to trim in. We maximize lift right at the threshold of a stall. So we trim the main in till the top telltale stalls and let it back out and keep playing the main and use those top telltales as our guide to get optimum twist just at the threshold of a stall without stalling, and then conditions change. At this point, the boat's heeled over quite a bit, 21, 22 degrees of heel. It's probably too much heel. We'll go for a little bit of backstay, flatten the main out, have less heel, and then sheet a little harder. With the sail a little flatter, we can trim the main harder without stalling the top telltales. We're able to trim a little bit, and we just keep playing around with that. And traveler up a little bit, power the boat up. You can play with this at length, but it's main sheet that really controls those upper telltales. And this is for a conventional sheeting boat with the main sheet takes care of twist. As we look at this from behind again, in most sort of moderate displacement, conventionally rigged keel boats, the traveler is taking care of angle of attack, and the main sheet is really controlling twist when we're close hauled. When we're on a reach and we trim in from a reach to close hauled, then the main is doing angle of attack, and the boom vang takes care of twist. So that's in reaching mode, reaching trim. For close hauled trim, once the boom is over the traveler, we're really using the main sheet to pull the boom down, control twist, and the traveler takes over that angle of attack component. On some boats that don't have travelers or that are set up a little differently, they have vang sheet. So on a reach, we're using the boom vang to control twist. On some boats, dinghies, two-person sprits and skiffs, the boom vang is used to control twist, and the main sheet is used to control angle of attack. So that technique is called vang sheeting. When you use the boom vang for what we've been talking about, twist, about the main sheet doing, controlling twist, that's vang sheeting. And then the main sheet takes over the traveler's angle of attack responsibilities. So every sail has angle of attack, depth, and twist, but different setups, different boats have different controls to control angle of attack, depth, and twist. And the way you control them depends on the controls that you have available. Not every boat can bend their mast. And so if your mast is stiff or you don't have an adjustable backstay, well, that's one less thing to concern yourself with. But if you can bend your mast, then it's a way to flatten out the middle and upper part of the main. If you can't bend your mast to depower, then you'd have to use twist or angle of attack because you don't have control of that third component. All right, Josh, anything else on that? Yep.
Yeah, there was one more I think that matches in with this is how do you match the twist between your main and your head sail, and what is the optimum?
So this is a great question. The question is, trying to match up the trim of the main and the jib. And as a starting point, it's correct that the shapes should be matched. The air actually flows off the jib onto the main, and the sails should be trimmed in matching shapes. So as we go across that mix of trim spectrum, from flat sails with little twist to deeper sails with a lot of twist, the jib and main should be trimmed the same way in matching shapes. And if you ask a jib trimmer, they'll agree that the main should be trimmed to match the jib. After all, the jib leads the boat upwind, and the main trimmer would say, well, yeah, the jib should be trimmed to match my big mainsail, and the helmsman will have to negotiate a settlement there. But ultimately, the sails should be trimmed in matching shapes, and you should be able to look at the leeward side of the jib or the leeward side of the main and look up the slot of the jib and have see the sails in matched shapes. If you have a lot of backwind in the main, sometimes that's a sign of the main being too deep or draft forward, or not trimmed hard enough. And you can trim harder to get rid of that that backwinding in the luff of the main. But sometimes backwinding in the main is actually the jib being trimmed a little too hard and closing up the slot between the main and the jib. And often you can test just an inch or two, really burp the jib out if you want to be hip to the vernacular. Just an inch or two of ease in the jib might open things up a little bit and get rid of that backwind in the main. There are times, just to be clear, there are plenty of times when a little bit of backwind in the main is fast. When you're fully powered or starting to get overpowered, making the transition from moderate air sailing into heavy air sailing, letting the front part of the main backwind is a way to reduce power and keep from being overpowered. So it's not always a problem if there's some backwind in the front of the main. So try trim the jib in until it starts to backwind the main, and then ease out an inch or two, play around in that range. That shows you sort of maximum trim in the jib. One way to think about main trim in an initial setting is to get the boom in and trim the boom so it's at the center line, right at the center line with the boom. That means the traveler is above the center line to get the boom to the center line, and then trim the main sheet so the telltales are just at the threshold of a stall aloft. You can see I actually don't have any telltales in the lower part of the main here. I never really look at those. I actually take the telltale off the bottom batten and move it up between the upper two. I have 3 on my sail, 3 telltales up in the top and none at the bottom. I didn't want to get a whole nother telltale and add it up there. I didn't want to add the weight or the expense of that additional telltale. So I just stole the telltale off the bottom batten and moved it up between the top 2. So there are 3 on my main up there, because that's where all the action is. And so this is our initial setup with the main. Telltale's right at the threshold of a stall, boom to the center line, and enough backstay to keep the boat from heeling too far. And then from there, we trim the jib in to match the main. And we trim the jib a little harder until we start to see a little bit of backwind in the main, perhaps. And that would be a sign we're getting the jib trimmed in too hard. And we just try to look up the slot here and match the shape of the main and jib. The twist profile of the 2 sails is matching. If you're sailing on a fractional rig, of course, the very top of the main doesn't have the benefit of a jib to help it, but your sailmaker will have designed the main to accommodate the difference in wind that the main experiences up there for lack of having a jib at the upper part. Josh, I could go on and on about sail trim. I only have about 25 hours of additional material on sail trim, and we haven't turned downwind yet. So,
2 very quick questions for you that I think you can answer pretty quickly, and I'll ask them both together. The first one is, can get more twist in the main. I think you might have mentioned this, is it traveler up and main sheet out? And then also secondarily, I think you mentioned it before as well, but could you, where was the question? Sorry. What is the name of the software that you're using again? And is it available to the public?
Yeah, so to answer the second question first, this is the NorthU Upwind Sail Trim Simulator. It is available as an application, as an app. You can get it in the, it's a paid app in the iOS Apple App Store or in the Play Store. And you also can get it off the NorthU website as a download for your computer. It will not run on the latest iOS, Mac OS Catalina. It runs on Mojave, but not on Catalina. I'm running it on my Mojave machine right now because my Catalina machine will not run it. It's a 32-bit program for those of you who want to know why. And we're at this point we can't port it, but there's also a website, and I'll put up the details on that at the end of the show on how you can access this simulator for your own use. So onward to twist, we pull the traveler up and then ease the main sheet. That adds twist, or we pull the main sheet on and let the traveler down. We can keep the boom at the center line and change the twist profile of the main while keeping the boom at the center line. So it's a combination of main sheet and traveler to keep the boom at the center line, and then play with twist in the main sheet. And we can use all our views. We'll try the helicopter view of that for now, just because we can. So there's the boom just at the center line, and telltales are stalling. We'll ease the main sheet a little bit. Get the telltales flowing again, adding some twist. Then we can pull the traveler up even further and add some more twist. Let the traveler down just below center line. Big puff, we're gonna let the traveler down, and we're gonna sheet in a little harder and just go to the threshold of a stall again with less twist now, more main sheet, less traveler. Okay, that is fun. A few things that I have learned playing with this. First, overall, sail trim is a complicated thing. There are so many variables. There's all these different controls for the main, controls for the jib, the two sails work together. Then there's a driver. And that's, in the trim simulator, the wind is perfectly steady. In the real world, the wind is another variable. So this trim thing, it is not easy. This whole sailboat racing thing is a complex endeavor. We kind of get the boat going fast, and now we got to deal with wind shifts, and the crew's got to get the sails up and down. If this was easy, we'd have mastered it and moved on to golf, but we're not going to master it. We'll never have to play golf. You can keep working at this. We'll do all that we can in the time we have here. All right. It is tricky. That is one of the biggest takeaways I've got from this. All right, so now we're going to go back into we were looking at these different mixes of power, trying to change the mix of power. And you should have, you can confirm for me, Josh, you got the mix of power screen back up here, and now I'm moving into an animation.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, so we're sailing along in perfectly steady wind, and then we get a puff. What do you do? Here's what you do. A puff hits, what happens? The wind gets stronger. And when the wind gets stronger, the apparent wind angle gets wider. And we let the traveler down to match that new apparent wind angle. Then as the boat accelerates, we head back up. So we're going to see what happens if you don't respond properly. The boat just heels over in the puff, and you waste the energy of that puff in weather helm, and you don't accelerate quickly. So the proper response to a puff, once again, watch the boom go down here as the puff hits. The apparent wind gets wider, the boom gets eased down, the traveler gets eased down, the boat accelerates, and we can pull, the apparent wind shifts forward, and we can pull the traveler back up again. that is a trim response. The preferred response to a puff is a trim response, not a helm response. Feathering up, you can feather up a little bit, but if you really want to accelerate, the way to play through a puff is to let the traveler down to respond to that puff, accelerate the boat. When you let the traveler down, you rotate the forces of the main forward. The boat accelerates quickly to match the new wind speed, and then you can trim back up. Ideally, we do the same thing with a jib if we had a traveler for the jib, but on most boats we don't. So we leave the jib alone, maybe feather a little for the jib's sake, but mostly it's main trim to work through a puff. Once again, traveler down as the puff hits, and then traveler back up as the boat accelerates to match that new wind speed. Diagram just showing that same thing. Traveler down as the puff hits, and then traveler back up. Or we can just heel the boat over and waste the energy of that puff in heeling force rather than acceleration. If you don't respond with trim, you have to respond to weather helm, and that slows the boat down. So we've described that as something you do with the traveler, and on most moderate displacement keel boats, the traveler response is the appropriate response. On some boats, particularly boats with tall rigs, big square top mains, and deep narrow keels, a twist response is preferred. On catamarans and multi-hulls, often a twist response is the better response because the top of the main loads up the keel so much that you'll stall the keel if you don't respond to that. So some boats, more moderate displacement keel boats, the conventional boats a lot of us are sailing, my boat, it's a traveler response, but on other boats, it's a twist response. On an Etchells, often it's just a big pull on the backstay to twist open the main and flatten the sail, and then ease the backstay off a little bit as the boat accelerates to keep the same angle of heel and a balanced helm. So it could be traveler, it could be sheet, it could be backstay, but it's a trim response to the puff, not a helm response that gets the boat most quickly up to full speed in moderate air. In heavy air, it's a little different. So here's our moderate air response. We've already seen this, but we'll review it quickly again. In moderate air, traveler down, and then traveler back up as we accelerate. But in heavy air, the boat doesn't really accelerate. If you're sailing in 15 knots of wind and the breeze goes to 18, or breeze is going 18, it puffs to 20, the boat doesn't go faster. And in those conditions, you still do a trim response and feather up combination, but just getting blown over is not fast. And it's hard to feather exclusively. It's a combination of a trim response and a feathering response to get the boat through a heavy air puff where the boat doesn't accelerate. All right. So here's how you can get the trim simulator. There's an online version at northsails.com, Sail Trim Sim. You can get it for your phone or tablet at the iOS or Play stores, and you can download it at northu.com downloads for Windows machines and for most Macs, but not if you're running Catalina. At least not until we solve that. Do a quick screen grab of that if you want, or you can come back and look at that again later when you can watch the recordings. All right, well, I'm going to run out of time here in a hurry, so I'm going to quick jump to a whole nother yeah. If you want to get more sail trim stuff, there's webinars online. If you're a US sailing member, you get a great deal on that. There's a session on spinnaker trim, session on asymmetric trim. We also have tactics webinar available, and US sailing members get a big member benefit. And we're going to jump to a different a new share here. Sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. Okay, so that's as much as we can do on trim for right now. We're going to jump into some tactic stuff just by way of an alternative form of entertainment. And I think I went back to the same share I had. So we're going to close that out of there. And excuse me just a sec while I get the right thing up here. Here we go. All right. So as we said, at NorthU, we consider boat handling, boat speed, and tactics. So we looked at a little bit of jibing. We played around with some upwind trim. Now we're going to play around with tactics a little bit. We're not going to spend too much time here, but it's probably an accurate reflection of the importance of tactics overall. If you're going really fast, the tactics aren't that hard. Got to sail well and sail fast. Sometimes you think you have a tactical problem. It's really just the base of your pyramid crumbling out from beneath your tactics. You can't execute the tactics if you're not going fast. But here we go. I can tell you it's 7 minutes of 3, and we're going to go past 3 o'clock here, at least Eastern time. Whatever time zone you're in, we're going to go past the hour because we got a little bit of stuff to talk about in wind shifts. If you're going upwind and the wind shifts and you're closer to the shift, you gain. How much? 25% of the separation of the boats for a 10-degree shift. I won't go into the trigonometry here. But in a 10-degree shift to the left, the boat on the left gains 25% of the leverage or separation. So that is a lot for just a 10-degree shift. And in fact, if 2 boats start even and sail for 1 minute at 6 knots, they'll be 848 feet apart after just 1 minute, and there's 212 feet to be gained or lost on just 1 minute and a 10-degree shift. So lots of leverage, and we're going to talk about how to find those shifts coming right up. It's a similar thing going downwind. The wind shifts have a big impact, particularly in light to moderate breeze downwind, similar to what they do upwind. So there are lines of equal position going upwind and similarly downwind. The boat closer to the shift, in this case, upwind, the boat on the left gains going upwind, and similarly, the boat away from the shift gains going downwind. If you take upwind strategy and tactics and stand it on its head, that's downwind strategy and tactics. So you want to sail towards the shifts, get headed, and tack to sail lifted going upwind. So you sail to the shift, get headed, tack, and sail lifted going upwind. Downwind, you sail away from the shift. When you get lifted, you jibe to sail headed. You want to be headed down going downwind, just as you want to be lifted up going upwind. There are a couple of tricks to that. One is that upwind, we can use our compass to figure out the pattern of wind shifts. And the best predictor in the near term for what the wind will do after the start is the pattern of wind shifts prior to the start. You need to get out and get some upwind numbers in the course area, and that's your best guide to what to expect going upwind right after the start. Get the forecast, use your local knowledge, know what's going on with the current, but also just gather data. Good data will help you. The recent past is the best predictor of the near future. I'm required by the Wind Shift Association to tell you that past performance is not a guarantee of future wind shift activity. Read the prospectus in full and understand that in just a minute, you'll have more than 200 feet at risk on a 10-degree shift. The prudent yachtsman will use a combination of great boat handling, competitive boat speed, and tactics for overall performance success. Thank you. Now, how do we find the wind shifts going downwind? Our course downwind is not nearly as narrowly defined as it is upwind, so we can't just use compass numbers to find the shifts going downwind. In fact, it's pretty tricky to find the shifts going downwind, and we're going to try and figure that out. But we want to sail away from the shift downwind and jibe. So here's a brief animation, jibing on the headers, jibing on the lifts and sailing headed. Boat gets headed, jibes to sail headed. As he gets lifted, he jibes and sails, and jibing on each shift going downwind, just as you do in the oscillations going upwind. But still, the question is, how do you find them, right? Upwind, you tack on the headers and sail lifted. Downwind, we jibe on the lifts to sail headed. But still, the question remains, how do you find the shifts? And I got to tell you that as a former foredeck crew who went to the back of the boat one day and found out it was much drier back there, I decided to become a tactician. Actually, I wasn't a tactician at first. At first, I was a grinder, but for reasons that remain unclear, that didn't really work out. So then I became a tactician. I could figure out that wind shifts going upwind. I could do the numbers. I was okay with math. I knew port higher header, but that was good. But downwind, the wind shifts were still baffling. And one of the things I found really helpful was to just tell my skipper that there weren't that many shifts going downwind, and that way sort of create low expectations as an approach to job security. So I told my skipper there weren't going to be that many wind shifts going downwind, and my skipper was, shall we say, skeptical. So I said, imagine that you had a very astute tactician, and my skipper made some snarky remark about how much different that would feel, and I just ignored that and carried on. I said, imagine you had a very astute tactician, and he determined that there were wind shifts every 6 minutes before the start. Tuning up before the start, in the start area, we find wind shifts every 6 minutes. And 3 minutes before the start, there's a wind shift. How soon after the start will we get our next shift? So there's a shift every 10 knots of wind, shifts every 6 minutes, and there's a shift arrives 3 minutes before the start. How soon after the start will we get the next shift? 6 minutes between start shifts, 3 minutes till the start, there's a shift. When will the next shift arrive? We're not doing trigonometry here. 3 minutes, right? Soon, the next shift will arrive 3 minutes after the start. That's true to a point. The next shift will arrive in the start area 3 minutes after the start. With any luck, we will no longer be in the start area 3 minutes after the start, but we'll have actually made some progress going upwind. We won't be stuck in the start area, but we'll sail upwind and we'll meet that shift part way in about 2 minutes and 10 seconds. And with a 10-minute shift frequency at the start area and 10 knots of wind, 6-minute shift frequency and 10 knots of wind, we'll get shifts every 4 minutes and 20 seconds going upwind. As we turn downwind, what's going to happen, right? So We get to the first shift after 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Shift frequency is 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And then we turn downwind. What's going to happen? Now we're sailing away from the shifts, and the shifts will come every 10 minutes. When we're sailing upwind, the wind speed of 10 knots, the boat speed of 6 knots, the VMG of 4 knots, about 14 knots closing speed, will have shifts every 4 minutes and 20 seconds going upwind. We turn downwind, now we're sailing away from the shifts. 10 knots of wind, 6 knots of boat speed, 4 knots of VMG. 10 minus 4 is 6 knots of closing speed and a shift every 10 minutes. On a 15-minute leg, a 1-mile run, we might get only 1 shift down the whole leg. Depending on the length of the leg and when the first shift arrives, we might get 1 or 2 shifts going downwind. We'll have 3 or 4 or even 5 going upwind. So downwind, perhaps 1 or 2 shifts. So when I told my skipper the shift frequency was going to be less, it was true. So how do we find those shifts? It's still tricky to find them. So downwind shifts every 10 minutes. Upwind every 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is for 10 knots of wind and an average boat speed of about 6. If your wind speed is lower or your boat speed is higher, the frequency, the ratio gets even more dramatically different. For faster boats or lighter winds, the ratios get to 3 or 4 to 1. If you go sail one of the America's Cup boats, you actually catch up to the shifts that are ahead of you going downwind, but that's a whole nother world. One thing that helps find the shifts going downwind is to get in phase going upwind. So if you figure out what's the lifted tack going upwind, get onto the headed tack as you turn downwind. You can also find the shifts by paying attention to the wind as you sail downwind and feeling the apparent wind and the angle of the wind as you go. In a lull downwind, the wind will go forward, the apparent wind will go forward and feel lighter because that's a lull. In a puff, the apparent wind will go aft, In a puff, the apparent wind will go aft and feel stronger because that's a puff. The apparent wind goes aft in a puff and feels stronger. It feels stronger because it's a puff. It swings aft because the wind is dominating the apparent wind speed. In a lift, the wind goes aft because that's what a lift is, a shift aft, without getting stronger. So there's a true wind shift, and you should jibe when you're lifted and sail the other jibe. So you're looking for the wind to go aft without feeling stronger. That's a lift. You can also use the pattern of wind shifts from your previous leg going upwind to find the shifts going downwind. Whatever was going on with the wind shifts upwind, if the puffs are from the right, the lulls are from the left, that pattern will persist. You can also go to school on other boats, particularly upwind boats. They be able to tell you what to expect going downwind. Well, Josh, do I need to wrap up here, or can I run on for another 5 minutes?
I think you can go another 5 minutes if you want, Bill, and then we got a couple more questions. But yeah, why don't we try to wrap up by 3:15 at the very latest?
Okay, we'll do that. We're going to jump from wind shift stuff into a little bit of tactics, and we'll just do a quick bit of tactical stuff, upwind and downwind. So here's boat on boat. We're the red boat. We're going to cross the yellow boat by a boat length. What should we do? We could cross them. We're on a short distance from the port tack lay line, a long run on the starboard tack lay line. What's our play? Well, we have 4 choices. We could tack and lee bow the yellow boat. We could cross and tack. We could just ignore them and keep sailing on, or we could go a little distance and tack. Those are really the 4 choices we have. What should we do? All right, those are the 4 options. Let's take a look at each and then we'll pick one. If we tack and lee bow, that could be a good play, but we also might be pinning ourselves. We need a longer, we need a long enough runway there to make sure that the lee bow will work. If it's a long leg, then this is a good play. But if it's a short hitch, we might just be pinning ourselves with a lee bow, right? So a long lee bow is a good play. That's often the best play if it's a long lee bow. But for a short lee bow, right, there's the long lee bow, strong play. But on a short lee bow, it might not work. We might not be able to get clear to tack. So another option might be to cross, tack, and pin. We're a boat length ahead, we tack, now we're even, but we get to control the tack to the ley line and we'll lead going around the mark. So we're not pinning ourselves. This is a better play, I think, for a short hitch to the ley line. We pin the other boat, slam dunk them if they tack, if they're ducking us, and pin them out to the ley line. They hip up on us and just round right behind, but at least we're ahead. We'll be under pressure when we round. They'll be close behind us, but at least we're ahead. All right, so that's the cross and tack to pin them instead of lee bowing and having them potentially pin us. Third option, just to sail our boat, never mind them. Too many other things to worry about. Sail your boat. This is sort of a passive play. Any small wind shift or change in conditions, we only have a boat length advantage. When we tack once and they tack once, we'll still only have a boat length advantage coming into the mark. There may be a better choice than that. So they're just sailing on. The fourth choice is to cross, sail a short hitch, and then tack, a delayed tack. What's going to happen if we do that? If we do a delayed tack, then the yellow boat will lead us to the ley line. They'll get to the ley line first, and what are their choices? When the yellow boat gets to the ley line, he can tack, and then we get to tack on him, lee bow him all the way to the mark, and turn our small advantage into a bigger advantage. It would be great to be able to round the windward mark with a 3 or 4 boat length lead, not under pressure, as compared to a 1 or 2 boat length lead where they're an immediate threat. So on a match race, if you're 4 boat lengths ahead, you feel like you're free and clear. If you're just a boat length or 2 ahead, it's a toss-up as to who will get to the leeward mark first. So this delayed tack puts the yellow boat at a disadvantage where you can give them bad air all the way to the mark. How did that work out for them? Well, by sailing a short distance, just less than a speed build's distance before we tack, when we rejoin them, they've just come out of their tack. They're not quite up to full speed. It makes it easier for us to give them to tack on their air and give them bad air into the mark. So how'd that work out for the gold boat? Not well. What else could they do? Well, they could tack early, and that just means they have to do 2 extra tacks, and that's a gift for us. They could carry on beyond the ley line, and every boat length they sail beyond the ley line is just a boat length's gift to us as well. When they sail beyond the ley line, they're giving us distance. They'll be able to put their bow down a little bit and make it up, but not much. Otherwise, we'd all go beyond the ley lines. So sailing this delayed tack gives the yellow boat 2 choices when they get to the ley line. Neither of them is very good. They can tack on the ley line or they can overstand. So the delayed tack option is a good play in this boat-on-boat tactics going upwind. Pretty fun, pretty good for the red boat, but I kind of hurried through this section and I got a little mixed up actually, because it turns out we were on the yellow boat. I should have checked my notes. All right, well, we're on the yellow boat. What do we do here? We want to reduce our gauge. we want to try and sail high rather than fast. Sailing fast is just getting us to a ley line that's no good. We want to sail higher rather than faster, trade in some speed for height. And that will hopefully get us close enough to the red boat that we'll then be able to tack on their hip and give them pressure, have them under pressure when we round the windward mark. You know, it's hard. You're not going to probably, even diagramming in a computer, it's hard to make the boat point that much higher, but you can point a little bit higher. How do you do it? What's the trim for that? The trim for that is to close the leech and sail with less twist. Normal on the right, normal amount of twist, sails in match shapes. Trim the jib a little harder and the main a lot harder. Force the boat higher, giving away a little bit of speed, adding some height, trading in speed for height to get closer to the red boat, and then try and hip up on him and round to attack him as we turn downwind. I'm afraid we're going to have to save that downwind attack for another day. So perhaps we'll come back and talk about those downwind tactics and how to do that, but that'll be the next time. We have worked our way up the pyramid, but never off the top. We're never get to the get it completely built. So once again, quick look at how to get the trim simulator. You can get the recordings of the NorthU sail trim and boat speed webinars with a member benefit discount. There's downwind sections in addition to upwind. There's also a tactics webinar recorded and available online as a US Sailing member benefit. For North Sails and NorthU, I'm Bill Gladstone, and I thank you for coming out to share some afternoon time with us, and thank you for allowing us to wander on here a little past our appointed time.
And thanks so much, Bill. Appreciate you being here with us today. We had one quick question that I think that could be addressed. Most of the stuff that you've gone over is for monohull boats. Would most of the, at least the tactics, but would the sail trim kind of be similar for multi-hull boats?
Yeah, most of the stuff works very similarly for multi-hulls. The cost of tacking is a little different, and some of the trim techniques, it's more twist-driven sail trim versus depth-driven sail trim on multi-hulls. So the response to puffs and lulls is more with sheet and twist for multi-hulls, and higher performance monohulls as well. It's twist-driven trim. The tactics play out the same way in a lot of respects, and the angles downwind for multi-hulls for the downwind tactics, for sure you're always playing the angles and working on apparent wind speed. So it's the same thing, only more so for multi-hulls going downwind.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Bill, for being here. We all very much appreciate it. And as Bill mentioned, we mentioned at the start, there is a new US Sailing member benefit, 25% off the live webinars, which I believe are you in the middle of your tactics or sail trim webinar.
Yeah, we've just wrapped that up, but it's now available as a recording.
Great. So. And so you can head over to the NorthU website to be able to activate on your US Sailing membership discount, which is 25%. I've actually put into the chat feature here a link that goes directly to the member coupons page. If you just put that link right into the address bar of your web browser and then log in with your member ID and password, it'll take you right to the member coupons, which includes the 25% NorthU discount. Sorry, I live next to an airport. So all
right.
You don't get to hear the planes going above. People are still traveling. But definitely activate on that member discount. We're very much appreciative of it, Bill and NorthU and everyone there. So thank you for joining us here today. And if you all enjoyed our session today or any of the other sessions, please support our efforts, build a community of active, engaged sailors through the Starboard Portal by purchasing or renewing your US Sailing membership. We have a lot of great content coming up on the schedule this week. We have a great US Sailing team presentation tomorrow afternoon. We have the two newbies on the USA Sail GP team, Brian Gardell and Peter Kinney on Wednesday. And then we have a special treat on Friday as well, too. So please, thanks to all the US Sailing members, we were able to evolve and kind of better serve you sailors with content like this. So please join us and visit mem.ussailing.org to join or renew your US Sailing membership today. Bill, thanks so much, and thank you all for holding on with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. It's been fun. Thanks.
Take care, all. Happy Monday.